Okay, guys, today I'll be interviewing whom I consider a friend and a mentor. I'm blessed to have him in my life because he believed in me and he has given me so much value. I would like to introduce. Can you? Hi, Kelvin. First,
Hey,
how are you
how you
doing?
doing?
I'm doing good. Can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yes, my name is Kelvin Thomas. I'm a property manager for Edgewood Management. I am also a um YouTube personality on Debates Among Friends, um, where we have many shows covering sports, comics, TV, pop culture, all sorts of things. Um, and, all around a general human being. I won't swing it one way or the other. But how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Um, it's I like your personality, but I would like to. But thank you for the background a little bit. Um, I would like to say when I first met you, I find that you're very different from every person that is out there. What I mean by this is this: you're very open minded, right? If
Hmm.
I because I am a very curious person, but I wasn't always like this. But I I can ask anybody any question and they get stumped, right?
Hmm.
And they wouldn't know how to answer me. But you in particular, I throw a lot of question at you, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, but you'll be able to answer me. Was it always like that? I'm curious, like how did it get this? Why you're so open minded?
Um, a lot of reasons, but um, probably the one that I run back to the most is a interview that Bruce Lee did back in the 70s, where the interviewer was asking him, after he asked him to define his fighting style, and he was kind of all over the place with it because it was his own style. Um, but he kind of asked him, if you had to give advice to anyone listening out there, what would it be? And he said, be like water. You put water in a vessel, in a cup, and it becomes the shape of that cup. You pour it out, and it takes the shape of whatever you poured it on. So if everyone kind of adopts the same mentality in life, um, you find yourself being much more open. And to the point of, sticking with water, if you are a closed minded person, it's kind of like trying to contain a river with a dam. Um, there's not to say that there's necessarily anything wrong with being closed minded. I couldn't do that myself. But um, even dams have to have ports for some of the water to get out, else you create a flood. So, try not to be completely closed minded with things. Be like water and just flow, and it'll make everything in your life a lot easier to deal with.
Wow, I feel like so many people are affected by Bruce Lee. I'm serious. Uh, because I just interviewed a Wing Chun master. It was pretty amazing. You know, that was legitness. But uh, but toward how can you're pretty successful yourself? How can people win in life, and what is the methodology for winning and becoming successful?
It starts in the morning when you wake up and you tell yourself, I've already won. Um, I'm not a big fan of books like The Secret and The $1 Million Philosophy or anything like that. But to a point, they do make a very valid argument in that when you feel defeated, you defeat yourself. And when you feel successful, you feel more confident, you give off that aura of being confident to everyone around you. And thus they automatically assume that you are confident or are successful. Um, so, as soon as you wake up in the morning, even if it is not what you feel, I dread waking up every morning. I'm not a morning person and I get quite zombie like, but I just have the mindset of, okay, I'm going to go, I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to knock this out so I can come back and go back to sleep. That's my mindset, but it works a lot in the same ways.
So you would say that it would have to all do with the mind, or the mindset, if you will, right?
Not completely, but that
Hmm.
is most definitely where it starts. Um,
Sorry. So what do you mean by not completely?
well, again, another one of the sources that I like to go to a lot is Batman. Um, for a fictional character, he's pretty well rounded. Um, but if you look at any halfway decent Batman story, a lot of them will rely on his mind. He is first and foremost a detective, but um, it's not just enough for him to be a detective. He also had to train for several years in his craft. He had to learn sciences. He had to get his body and his mind fit for the task that he saw ahead. And that is the other side of what is needed to be successful. It's not enough to wake up and go, I will be a success because I think I am. No, that is most definitely the 80% that will get you there. But another 20 is just as important. And that is the preparation to be successful. Even if it is, prepping what you're going to wear the next day before you go to bed, or making sure that you've read up on that book that you're going to talk about the next day. Um, that 20% of preparation will go very, very, very far.
I hear what you're saying, right? You're saying in order to become successful, we should prepare. But I feel like not many people are prepared. How can they actually start preparing for success or any opportunity that comes their way?
Anything that we want in life, we usually tend to, kind of fantasize or romanticize about before we actually go out and get it. Um, if you're like me and you've just been waiting for that new Harley to come out and you're like, oh my God, once it drops, this is going to be awesome. You start reading all the brochures and, you start getting that picture in your mind of what you're going to look like when you're on it. Um, that's kind of where that preparation starts. It is, what do I need to do? Just in your head, what is it that I need to do to get to that goal? And that's kind of the part where a lot of people end up defeating themselves. They fully realize that, okay, it's going to be an uphill journey to get to that point, and thus they just automatically say it's not worth it. I will never make it there. It is not worth the effort. I'm just going to stop right now. Um, don't do that. Even if you make it a tenth of a way up the hill, you're still a tenth further than where you started. And if you keep doing that, eventually you'll hit that 100% and you'll be at the top of the hill. So, again, that preparation and that mindset, it goes hand in hand. And you can't be a success without one or the other.
I see. And also, I would like to add a little bit when you say that, we also, prepare our mind and absorb, like, you get excited, right?
Mm-hmm.
You try to reach, like you said, romanticize about the thing that we're trying to achieve, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's also why that's how we start taking action and we start buying the thing that we want because we take a picture in our mind and then we feel the feeling in our body that of the happiness that we about the object, whatever it is, a toy or an iPhone, and we like wow, and that's how you don't buy on logic, but you buy on emotion, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
that's how it is. So in you are a property manager and you have to manage people from day to day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how can you really manage people and or can you bring out the best out? How can you bring out the best out of people
You have
in the
to,
right way? Sorry, go ahead.
well, no, you're all right. Um, First off, you have to recognize the strengths and weaknesses within yourself. Um, if you aren't a very strong orator, maybe you prefer to write things down, and that's how you communicate. Um, or maybe if you're not a strong writer, then you beef up your oral skills, and that's how you communicate. But you have to recognize the strengths and weaknesses within yourself first and foremost. Um, and then you have to try to mirror them to the people that you're managing. Um, if you know that you have one person who math is just not their strong suit, well, obviously you're going to try to avoid giving them anything math related. Um, it just doesn't make any sense. But again, you have to know that about those people in order to effectively manage them or lead them.
Oh, sorry about that. I was in listening. I was like, wow. So basically, you're saying that you have to be flexible with people, right?
You do, again, to a point. Um, you want to be flexible in the way that you approach people and approach tasks, but at the end of the day, you still have a job to do. You still have to get from point A to B, and that you can't be flexible on. You have to know within yourself that, no matter what, push come to shove, we're going to get from A to B, but now what is the best way to do that?
Okay. I would like to, because as I was getting a feel for you, do you see yourself as Batman, or you like portray him as that? Because I know you into Batman too a lot.
I really am. I grew up on Batman, so that was kind of my probably first role model, I would say. Um, I don't necessarily see myself as Batman. Um, I'm not quite to that point yet. I don't feel like um, there's always more room to grow, room to learn, room to develop myself. But I do I probably relate more to Bruce Wayne in the sense that I have that drive and that determination to do it. I know
Yeah,
what it takes and I know what I need to do to get there.
yeah, I can see that in you. I really like when I first met you. I can see it in you, right? Like you have this aura or like confidence into you. I was like, wow, like that hit home. Like I was like, wow, that's amazing. Um, for so many of my generation and so many young people who are on their phone texting, which I want to, cause you know me, I read, but I never was like this before. I never knew how to communicate. I don't know how to be able to get my message across, right? So my point is, what I'm trying to say is that to those who are listening to the audience, it's not always because texting, you can get away with it, right?
Mhm.
But people are always about themselves.
Right.
It's not always it's not always about yourself. It's about other people. But how can they what how can they understand people, and what can you give? Can you give the advice to the audience to help them to become more successful with understanding people and relation in their relationship with others?
Um, First, you kind of need to look at yourself. Again, everything starts with you. Um, if you actually kind of let me backtrack. A lot of people lack the ability to be able to self-examine themselves and really be honest with themselves about what they see. And again, just like with your mindset, that's kind of the first place where they falter in that. Anyone who cannot see the fault in themselves, because I think we can all agree that no one's perfect, anyone who can't see the fault in themselves is already doomed to fail from the start. You have to be able to recognize what's wrong with you. I'm not saying that that needs to be the point where you stop examining. Um, but it's just very important that you be able to recognize, okay, here's what I need to work on. And once you have done that, okay, now you need to examine how those things affect other people. If you're an angry person, how does your anger affect others? Or, if you are sad, how does that affect other people? And vice versa. If you're, you know, I have a sibling who is constantly happy. She's always walking on sunshine. And me not being a morning person, you can see the hilarity that ensues in the early morning hours whenever we're around each other. Um, so, it's kind of one of those things of you have to examine the things that you do and how that affects other people. Once you've done that, then now you can start looking at other people and going, okay, this person is really annoying. How does that affect me and why? And what can I do to not have that same reaction? A lot of times you have two very distinct types of people, um, and they kind of fall in line with your introverts and your extroverts.
I was gonna
Your
say that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
your introverts in terms of emotion, they tend to hold a lot of things in, and a lot of the times it's not even just their own emotion. It is how others treat them and how that affects them. They also
That's
hold it
true.
in. Whereas your extroverts, man, you make them mad and you will never hear the end of it. So, you know, again, in dealing with other people, you have to know yourself, but you also have to at least be open to how you affect others. And once you kind of get that back and forth working, it becomes a lot easier to communicate with people. You can start seeing when you've said or done something that makes someone else upset, and hopefully you can try to correct or come back from that. And on the opposite end of it, if you know that you've made someone happy, then hopefully you'll be able to know what about you did it, so that maybe you can do it again later on down the road.
Ah, I see. Well, thank you so much for making that clear because I am actually introverted. Introverted, but I'm like more like a mixture of both. Because
Mm-hmm.
well, if I'm around with my friends, I'm loud, right? Because
Right.
it's fun. But we, I had a lady before. I'm always, for me as a person, my way of winning is about introspection. Sometimes that's how I learn things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I feel like people push, there's nothing wrong with being introverted, extrovert, but we live in a world where people push the person to try to be an extrovert. I know that because I read in the book where, how Harvard tried to push an introverted person to be extroverted. That's not really, you have to be able to cope, that's not, you can't just push a introverted to be extroverted, you know.
Right.
Right, and I would disagree with a lot of people on, you should go outside a lot. But what if the outside world is boring to me? Like, what, like, can't you understand? Yeah, I'm trying to like talk to the audience. Like, can't you understand? Like, the outside is not interesting. It's just like Albert Einstein. He's not interested. He's interested in physics, right? Or
Right.
whatever he's doing because these ideas are interesting. They're like you can have a conversation like yourself. You're always so curious, and we can like talk about any subject, and we just connect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing wrong with that. And before we talk on the other subject, can you also, because you also hit home when I talk to you, I think in the morning, you talk about effective communication. Can you actually help the audience out with the effective communication?
Yeah. Basically, effective communication in and of itself is getting a message or a transmission from point A to point B. Effective communication, effective being the key word, is communication that goes from point A to point B in the shortest, most concise, yet still understandable time frame. So it's the difference from saying "excuse me" to yelling "hey you." Um, is it necessarily polite? No, but is it effective? Yes, because everyone in the room, for the most part, is going to turn around and wonder if you're talking to them. You've gotten that message from point A to point B. So um, communicating effectively is just all about knowing who your point B is and what form of communication they typically prefer. Me, myself personally, I am much like most people these days where I prefer text or emails. Um, I can I get alerts, I can read them at my leisure. Um, and on top of that, I also have a point of reference to go back to. So, for me, that would be effective communication. And if you were communicating with me, that's what I would typically prefer. But again, everyone's different. I have friends who still prefer to get handwritten letters. I have friends who still prefer phone calls. So I know that when I'm reaching out to them, in order to be effective, I usually have to take that form. And even then, the wording changes. Again, if I was talking to someone younger, I could probably wrap this conversation up in 2 minutes and tell them all about my life on its current day. Whereas if I was talking to, say, my mother or my grandmother, I would have to elaborate. And this conversation gets much longer because that's the type of communication that they prefer. So,
That makes sense. Okay.
yes. Um, so again, effective communication isn't hard. You just need to know who your audience is, or at least have a general understanding of who your audience is in order to be able to pull it off.
Right. And I remember that you taught me about there's the person who's communicating. You draw on the board where the person is communicating, and there's the whatever written. You said there's written. There is what was it? I can't remember.
There's written, oral, and
Right.
uh, non-written, non-oral, which basically
They
translates to body language or things that are implied.
imply.
Yes,
What do you mean?
if we were both standing outside and I said, "Hey, meet me over here," you don't necessarily know where here is. You're probably just going to wait for me to start walking and assume that it's over where I'm walking to, because meet me over here isn't very succinct. It isn't informative. It's implied that I know that you know what I'm talking about.
Okay, I get that. Okay,
Yeah.
but there's always a misunderstanding on the communication part, right? Always.
Right. And again, that just goes to your differences between communication and effective communication. If I say, "Hey, meet me over here," I've communicated, I've sent my message from me to you. But was it clear? Probably not. Was it timely? Sure. It's like 5 words, but you didn't necessarily get the message, therefore it's not effective. Whereas if I said, "Hey, meet me over by the benches," okay, now you know what I'm talking about. So although it took a little longer to get out, it's still effective because you actually got the message and it was clear.
Right. It's very interesting. I'm very observant. Like you taught me that too. But the words, either in written words, sometime, or how we verbalize or how we communicate our body. It's how we also perceive it to be. You can like type in, because I saw it myself. I have to like introspect myself, because a lot of people can't. They aren't. See, most people are lying to themselves because they're always relying on external senses. You know, they don't have to. They're not aware of themselves, right?
Right.
Because to be able to fix something, you must become aware of something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I saw a word, like some some person type it, and in their end it means something different from my end. I look at it like it looked funny, but it didn't intend it to be like that. So it's
Right.
how we perceive it to be, right?
Very true. And the old saying that perception is reality is very much so true. Your perception is your reality, but how you perceive things is completely up to you. So, um, again, if I send you a message and you perceive it to mean one thing, then it's not very effective. I should have been more clear.
Yeah,
You know,
well, yeah, okay, that's understandable. It's just that, see, my philosophy on this about perception, everybody say perception is reality. My take on it, they may know it, like, they may verbalize uh, perception is reality, except I feel like people don't really consciously know it, because if it was to be the case, then they can change their perception, right? Because I understand a lot about people. It's not easy. Well, sometimes make mistakes, but I still understand people not to a level that you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that if we can change our perception, right, we can change our results, or if we can, it's because it has to do with the subconscious, right, where
Right.
all the fixed ideas, all the belief that you have creates a filter, it creates a lens. Like we in the world that we live in, people see this physical, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're using their eyes to see, right? Their physical eyes to see the world, right?
Right.
But it's how their mind interpret reality. So I believe that the ideas and the ideas that turn into belief become part of you, and that's how you see the world. As they say, we don't see the world as it is; we see the world as we are, and it can. The ideas and belief control your perceptions. It control your attitude towards yourself and other people in the world. You know, um, I would like to ask: we live in a world it's very stressful. How can we cope, or how can we handle stress?
Everybody has different ways of coping with stress. Um, some are destructive, some are constructive, and some people again are very kind of passive about it. Um, but it's all about finding the right way that works for you and still keeps you on the track that you want to be on. Um, again, I have friends who, well, actually, I even have family members who will turn to, drugs or alcohol if they get extremely stressed. Um, I have friends who will turn to maybe cigarettes or even possibly gambling. And then again, at the same time, I have friends who, their stress relief is going hunting or going fishing or building something. Um, so, again, everybody kind of deals with it differently. The key is finding what works for you that still keeps you on the path that you want to be on.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much for that. That
Well,
makes sense. And also, I would like to, since we're talking about people and relationship, how can we um, be able to have a better relationship with people, with others, or our significant others, or anything like that?
well, the key to any relationship, be it platonic, romantic, whatever the case may be, it's always about communication. Um, and again, if you can look at yourself, look at them, come up with those ways of effectively communicating, um, then your relationship will 9 times out of 10 flourish. There are still those, that 1% of the time where no matter what it is you've done, this other person just already had another idea in their head. But if you were to ask them, a year down the line, or sometimes even a few weeks down the line, why they did what they did, their answer is probably going to be completely different from what you thought it was. And again, part of that is communication. You can be the best communicator in the world, but if you can't understand whether or not your audience, being that other person, is actually picking up what you're putting down, then you are not that great of a communicator, or they're just not that great of a listener.
So
Both of
wait, go.
these,
Sorry, guys.
I don't
I was
know,
gonna. No,
both those things are possible, but highly unlikely.
so you're saying that in order to be able to, because I know that I try. It's really hard to be able to effectively, like doing an interview with yourself and
Mm-hmm.
with many others. It's for me. I have to train myself to be able to listen, because there is a difference between listening and fake listening and actually active, actively engaging with the person that you're, because I believe that listening isn't just listening. I believe it's absorbing their whole, as a person. I can see it as behavior, their body language, as you say, their facial feature. There's a lot of things that goes into listening that people don't notice, and that they don't verbalize back to what, or paraphrase back to the people.
All right.
Right. So And this one you taught me. So in how can we improve our memories or make it better? Because people think that they have a bad memory, which I don't think they do.
Okay. I'm gonna answer that one, but I'm gonna hop back to your last point first.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So there was always something that I heard, uh, growing up in the South, especially from my parents, and it was, "Yeah, you hear me, but are you listening?" And hearing and listening are kind of those two very different marks you were talking about, where we hear things all the time. We hear things we don't even know we hear, but it's because we aren't listening for it. We aren't actively taking the time to pay attention to what it is that we're hearing. And so that's kind of the same thing in communication, where someone may be talking, writing, you may be glancing over this letter that's been sent to you, but you aren't really paying attention to it. And so you aren't actually getting the message. So, I mean, and that's what I mean by, just being a bad listener, is you're not really listening at all. It's very hard to actually be a bad listener unless you're deaf. But, as far as improving your memory, the one trick that I have that is all but surefire is called a Kim's test or Kim's game. If you have young kids and you just want to make it fun and exciting for them, but Kim's stands for Keep in Memory System, and it is basically where you are training your brain to pick up on those things that it normally glances over because it doesn't deem them as important. Such as the next time you walk into a building, go all the way to where it is you're going, and then try to remember what the sign on the front door said. And
So
you
you,
probably,
sorry.
oh no, well, I was just making the point that you probably wouldn't be able to do it, at least not the first time, because your brain has already dismissed that information. It didn't deem it as important. Therefore, it didn't keep it in your memory. And our brains work the same way as computers in that sense. Everything flows through the computer, and what the computer deems isn't necessarily important to its current task, it dumps it. So, in order to fix that, here is, or I shouldn't say fix that, to improve upon that, here is what you do. You get some sort of container. It could be, Tupperware or a paint jug, whatever it is you have laying around your house. Take 5 to 10 objects that fit not so neatly inside of this container. So pins, coins, anything that you can pick up around the house. Put it in this container and then turn the container over. Walk away, go to another room, do another task, come back 10 minutes later. And when you come back with a pen and a piece of paper and try to write down as many of those things inside the container as you can remember before you flip the container over and see what was inside. If you keep doing this and you keep randomizing what is inside the container, eventually your brain will start going, okay, I need to hang on to these minute details a little longer. I need to start, picking up maybe on some of these colors or some of these shapes so that next time you go to remember this, I don't have to search so hard for that image of what I just saw.
So you're basically saying making the recall or the retrieval. Yeah, I can't say it right.
The
Recall.
retrieval.
Yeah, there you go. To make it easier, right?
Right. And like I said, it's just like a computer. How, you can have 1,500 files on your computer, all individually named, all probably very important in their own right. And basically, what you're training your brain to do is you're training it to take all those files and sort them into folders. So that now, when I need to go back and look for something, I already know what folder it's in. I may not remember the name of the file, but I know what folder it's in. And that makes it that much easier for me to go back and pull it up faster next time.
Right. And I remember because I even remember the book that I read. It's NLP. You also said the past memory or the experience, when you look back at it, the memory, it's not what you thought it was. It's not the actual memory because every time you go back, it changed, right?
Right. Your memory isn't necessarily a photograph. So, my analogy earlier about the files isn't necessarily true. Um, but what your memory does do, which is really very interesting if you sit down and think about it, is it takes the facts that it does know and it tries to recreate what it is you think you saw or what you think you experienced, which is why a lot of the times, if you were to ask two different people about something that happened 2 days ago, you'd probably end up with two different stories because each of their brains are remembering things based off of those fractions of details that they did remember and building a story around those. If we saw a dinosaur walking down the street and it broke three cars and left a footprint, in the driveway, I would probably remember the footprint, you would probably remember the cars, and each of us would leave out the other parts of the story. So it doesn't take away from the fact that a dinosaur walked down the street 2 days ago, but it does change our perspective in how we viewed it, and thus it changed our memory of the actual event.
And it also has to do with the story that we play in our mind, right? It's
Correct.
because everybody see the things that people don't realize that in order to change how you see things, there's a story that there's playing. Because even if people don't see it, there's a movie that's being played or the story that's being played. It's just because they're the actor, the director of their own life.
Very much
So
so. And the easiest way to see that is to ask a kid to tell you something that is not true. Um, because, and we do this as adults, it's just much cuter when kids do it. Um,
I'm
but,
sorry, I got a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
whenever we make up a lie or a falsehood or a story or some figment of our imagination that we're telling someone, we always remember it very linear because that is how our minds are trained that time works. It works in a straight line. It was 2:45, now it's 2:46. What happened between 2:45 and 2:46? Whereas your actual memory, you can play it backwards, forwards, however you want.
Hmm.
But when we are trying to remember things, we remember it very much so in a straight line. And so it becomes a lot harder to pick up those details because, again, your mind is trying to get from point A to point B to point C to point D. It's not worried about going backwards. So, in your memory, like you said, when you're playing this movie out, when you're Scorseseing yourself, um, you're remembering it very much so in a straight line. You're not worried about what happened after the beginning or before the beginning because your mind has already wiped that part out. No one ever really wonders, what happened to Ripley to get her on the ship at the beginning of Aliens. We just know that she woke up and she was on the ship. So, you know, that is how our minds work through years of training and school. You know, we from a young age or the youngest age that we can probably remember, we are read stories and those stories are very linear. Very rarely, actually, as far as I've seen, no children's story works backwards from the beginning. And we usually only see it when we're much older and more so in movies or television because in our mind, because everything works forward, the idea of going backwards is such a far-fetched concept that it's very interesting to us. But things should be able to flow forward and backwards as, again, we were discussing, time is not a straight line.
Yeah, I was gonna joke with you. I was like, "Yo, you just talking about backward and forward, going back." I was like, "Oh, it's almost like a movie. I can like just, fast forward and rewind." I was like, "Oh, I can rewind my past," you know. But
Exactly.
yeah, but actually, to the make your point, you were talking about our brain. It's always seeing a linear or straightforward. It's where you get from A to point B or something like that. You
Mm-hmm.
know, You are actually correct. There is actually a mechanism in our mind. It's like if you set a target, in our brain, if you set a target, it will try to find a way to get there. It's like a what was it? Missile or a torpedo, and trying to, even if it deviates, it will get back on course.
Right.
Um, and speaking of kids, I would be, because I don't have kids. That I would like to prepare myself to. How can you prepare yourself for having kids or being a parent? You are a parent, right?
Yep. Um,
Right.
at the end of the day, you can't. um, the best thing that you can kind of do is work on yourself and try to be the best version of you that you can be. And similarly, trying to find the best complement of yourself that you can in someone else. Um, your significant other should be all the things that you lack in yourself, so that when you put yourselves together, you do make what, at least in your mind, is the perfect person. Um, Again, it's not to say that no one is without faults, because we all have faults, but you know, as far as dealing with little ones, is there's something new every day. It's always a challenge, and the best thing that you can do is kind of, once again, keep that open mind and just be prepared for the unexpected.
And it's a lot of hard work too, right?
I mean, it is, but it's the same kind of hard work that, it's no different than building a deck. Yeah, it seems backbreaking and labor intensive in the beginning or even in the planning stages, but once it's done and you have this beautiful deck to go sit out on and drink your wine, or stare at the sunset, it all makes it worth it in the end. So
That's because you care. Like, your mind has changed when you, because I read it, where when your mind or your brain is rewired to ask to be able to, because you see things differently as you're a father. You care for your kids, right? You see it like that, right?
mhm,
And that you will do anything to protect your kids. Is that true, or right?
yeah, yep.
Hmm. So my last question for you, and I want to know this. What's your what does success look like to you?
Okay. Well, success is different for everyone. So, um, you know, success for me is comfort. It is, being able to not only be comfortable in your own skin, which you should anyway, just, as an individual,
Some people
but
are, but yeah.
right. Um, but more so comfortable with your life. Um, I don't have millions of dollars, yet I live a comfortable lifestyle. I will probably never go spend months at a time on the French Riviera, but I'm okay with that. I am comfortable. I have what I need. My family has what they need. And most days, at least 6 out of 7, we are relatively happy. So, that is my success. Um, and again, I hope to keep building upon that and compounding on it. But even if I did not, in my mind, I am a successful person already.
So would you be saying that you are a family man, or you're all have to do with family, right?
Yeah. But again, it doesn't even necessarily have to stick with just that. If I had no family and I could still wake up and enjoy doing the things that I do day in and day out, then I would still count that as a success. Most people who count themselves as unsuccessful do so primarily because they aren't happy with their own lives. It is always, oh, I would be successful if I were a millionaire, or oh, I would be successful if I could just get this business off the ground. Their success is hinged on their happiness, as most people's are, but they just haven't found that happiness yet.
How can we find happiness? Can we?
I believe that we can, but that is a question that each of us has to ask ourselves. Because again, your version of happiness is different from my version of happiness. So I there is no blanket answer on that, but all I can say is identify what it is that makes you happy and then come up with a plan to get there.
Right. What you said is, I resonate truly because that's what I've been trying to get my message across, like because I believe that, as as an adult, we sometimes project our reality to others and expectation, and we make it very uncomfortable for the person. We may think that we're helping them, but it's actually not how they want it. Like the person, that's not how they wanted to live, because their your success, as I always say, that it's different. My success doesn't make you happy, but your success doesn't make me happy. It's about
Right.
understanding, right? Like you said back earlier in this talk, it's about understanding who you are, what your wants is, and you're be able aware of your own, like, be comfortable with your own skin.
Right.
But so many of the, because if you think about it, back in the day, if you were a kid, when you were a kid, because let's go to this because I want to get into this. When you were a kid, did the adults, your teachers, did they say you can become anything that you wanted to be?
Yep. Yes, they did.
But I know that you know this, and I know that you observe a lot, and as you grow old, that's not what I meant. You know what I mean, like
Yeah.
age. I didn't mean to do that, but because I don't have I seen it. I'm starting to see it because when I was a kid, I can I can like imagine things whatever I want. I still do because I believe in using my imagination. That's how we change our life, by innovation. Innovation meaning it doesn't have to be business, but it can meaning to change our life. Innovation. Because I came down, I was like, oh yeah, that's true. But it's when you grow up. I mean, when you were little, you were asked who you wanted to be, but when you were changed as an adult, they say you can't become anybody. You have to do what they see it fit. What do you think about that? Like, you see it, right?
I have seen it, and I also see both sides of the argument. Um, because if you think about a small child, like for instance, a kid that's in grade school, because that's typically when we're told you can be anything that you want to be. Um, that's kind of where that drive starts. At this point, everyone is on equal footing. No one knows more than the other kid, usually, and everyone is in this same class together, being taught the same thing by the same person. That is kind of our baseline. As the years progress and you start developing your own personality, your own friends, your own cliques, your own interests, a lot of these things tend to pull you away from the rest of the group. And so, wherein you may have started with 10 or 15 kids who all had the same baseline statistics, I guess we'll go ahead and say, now you have two kids who probably won't make it to the end of school because their interests or their friends have pulled them out of the classroom so much that you've fallen behind. You may have another kid who, we found out that you're just not that strong of a reader, but you might be the next Albert Einstein. Does that put him above the rest of the kids or behind the rest of the kids? So, it is as time goes on and these things start to develop and show themselves, that's now where we get to the point of going, okay, based on everything that you've done, learned, and said from this baseline of grade school until now, here is what we think you may be qualified for. Again, it is not the end all be all by any means. This is one person telling another person based on my opinion or based on what I know, this is what you should do. But it is up to each of us to come up with that own path. Again, how many times have we seen a story of someone who was supposed to do A and did B? I mean, again, if you look at Bill Gates, he dropped out of college and went in his friend's garage started a multi-billion-dollar corporation. So, again, just because someone tells you this is what you should do or this is what they think you will do, it's not written in stone. It is always your story to control however it is you see fit. And if you listen to them, you are allowing someone else to write your story for you.
Ooh, that is so good. I'm getting goosebumps, man. Oh, that is so good. Yeah, I totally agree with you. My whole life, this is what, because I had a manager before a long time ago. Because I'm not the person who I was. Um, I'm changed, right? Meaning
Mm-hmm.
that back then, when you were young, you caused trouble. Well, for me, I was a class clown. I got kicked out of high school for skipping too much school. It was because it was pressure,
Right.
and but I'm grateful. Actually, most people would say, "Why would you get?" People would look down on me, and say you should be like your brother. But then they don't understand the other side of the story, where I went to the boarding school, and that was the happiest day of my life, right? That's either and or, right?
Right.
But but see, the thing is, I was labeled as special ed, and it really irked me sometimes to be able to put a kid like IQ or like that into because of course there is what's that called the dyslexia and what was it, Down syndrome. Of course there's
Mm-hmm.
real, right?
Right.
But 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 for a person who isn't really both, maybe because I was speaking Vietnamese because my mom speaks Vietnamese, right?
Right.
So you can't just label a kid a special ed. What if that kid is a genius? You can't base off on grades because I don't believe in grades. That's my opinion, but
Okay.
it doesn't determine your intelligence, right?
Right.
And that what I'm trying to say is because right now, I would never thought that I would be able. It's my dream that I would be able to reach, expert, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that, and I get to tell a different story from my peers, my friend, and classmate because they don't know anybody successful, right?
Right.
So, what's your take on that? Like, that's really because it kind of depressed me because, like, not depressed me, but in like my mind, like you can't really judge a person from how they were little and say that they're going to be that way. That's what they call it, fixed mindset. And there's a growth mindset. But yeah, go ahead.
Um, I actually got asked this the other day, as far as just that baseline question of how can you judge somebody? And my response was, quite coldly, we do it all the time. We've actually,
Subconsciously.
well,
Subconsciously.
subconsciously and consciously.
Huh. Okay.
I mean, think back to, if you were ever little and you watched Sesame Street or The Muppets, and they would always talk about stranger danger. That is teaching a child to judge right off the bat. And I'm not saying that it was necessarily a bad thing, especially in those situations, but especially with a mind as malleable and spongy as a small child's, you can't necessarily cut that off. It's kind of like when you teach a kid to read and now they're just reading everything. So once you've taught them how to judge and differentiate and single things out, it kind of develops and grows from there. And yes, a lot of the times we don't know that we do it, such as, when you're waiting for the bus and someone that in your mind you have deemed as unsavory comes up and stands beside you, and, maybe you take a little step to the left and try to get away from them. Or it could be consciously where you go, you know what? I don't want to hang around that crowd. Either way it goes, we judge people on a daily basis. So I don't necessarily think that judging people is, I won't say that it is inherently bad, but I think that what we do with those judgments can very well be bad, especially for the relationships that we have in our lives. If we were to judge everyone based on our first thoughts, we would probably all be introverts who would never go outside because people suck. Um, but we don't do that. There are some things that, even though Ron from accounting may be a mouth breather, we've just learned to overlook. Even though we judge him for it, it is not a what I call a non-negotiable to a relationship. So as far as judging people, I don't think that we should get so caught up on the fact that we judge people so much as, okay, yes, we judge people, but what do we do with it? That's the important part.
But sometimes people use it in the wrong context sometimes because people judge people and then it changed their behavior to affect that relationship or the person, and that person say, well, I didn't really do anything, why would you, stuff like that. It changed the perception, right?
Very true. But again, your perception is your reality. Um, Even if, again, that 90% of language is nonverbal, you know, if I were to just take a step back every time you took a step forward, that is already sending that signal to you that I don't necessarily want you in my space. Even though I didn't say it, even though it may be based off a judgment, it is still a message that you were getting and hopefully getting loud and clear.
That is a
Um,
form of communication. I just realized that. Thank you.
yes,
uh,
yes, it is. Um, but and like I said, we do those little things like that to each other all the time, and that is how we define these relationships. Someone that you are close to, say, if you had a romantic relationship, you're going to allow that person in your bubble. You are going to say things. You're even going to talk to them differently than you do other people. It is a judgment that you have made based on how much you do or do not like this person, and even that was made from a judgment. So again, it is about what we do with those judgments. And I think that um, instead of trying to teach people not to judge other people, we should be teaching people how to constructively manage those judgments. Because, it is one thing for me to politely discuss my grievances with someone as opposed to, I just don't like you. You did that one thing Tuesday, and now I'm just not going to talk to you anymore. And that's not constructive for anyone.
oh, okay, I see that. um where can we find you online?
You can find me on Facebook at Kelvin Thomas. You can also find me on the Debates Among Friends Facebook page. We also have our YouTube channel, which soon will include Gaming Amongst Friends. And then you can find us on Twitter at Debates Among Friends. Kind of ran out of characters there, but it's just Debates Among FR. Um, and then we will also be coming out with a Instagram page relatively soon to chronicle all of our video gaming and trips that we take around the country talking to various people.
Okay, all right, thank you. One last, um since we're going to be talking about this, you're very eclectic.
Mhm.
I remember you said that you do your R&D, or research and development. Like, because I want to get my message through, like, because you're very like um eclectic, right? And I feel like
All right.
a lot of people bash on me for reading. I wasn't always like this, I keep telling them I wasn't always like this. I hate reading. I hate homework. I hate everything that goes against learning, right?
Right.
I hate education. So my message is, it's not about reading. It's about, because the day that you leave school or whatever, it's the day that you learn something. That's why the late Earl Nightingale, who I listened to the audio, he said the day that you leave college, it's commitment. It's the beginning. You
Right.
know, but people, for some, because I hear you what you were saying when I asked you about books, because you said that it was required. And I would, because I was gonna do this, I was gonna ask everybody, it's like, why you don't like reading books? It's because they were forced,
Yeah.
right? And I saw, because I was like observing your facial feature, and I was like, you it clicked your head. I was like, it kind of like light bulb. I was like, that's why. So where you get all the information? How you learn? Like,
Well, I again, I don't necessarily read for pleasure. It's not really what I do, but I have always been a very curious person. And, back before the invention of Google or Yahoo or even AOL for that matter, um, I actually had I don't know if, anybody that listens to this will remember, but when you used to have door-to-door salesmen selling encyclopedias, yeah, my parents were like, yeah, give us two sets. Um, and we had them in the hallway between all the bedrooms. And anytime that I would ever ask a question, and I knew when it would stump my parents, because the first thing that they would tell me, go look it up. And so I got very familiar with the encyclopedia. And, later with Encarta and Yahoo and then Google, um, of just going to look things up that interest me or that I was curious about. And I would, you find some very interesting things doing that. Um, I actually challenged myself once to go through the entire encyclopedia, article by article, and read them all.
Really?
I barely made it through the A's. And it took me about 2 weeks to do. But again, you learn very, very interesting things, and you never know when it might come up in a conversation. Um, when you may be sitting down watching Jeopardy and that $2,000 question pops up that no one else can seem to answer, but you know the answer to it. Um, and again, I'm not a nuclear physicist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not a professor. I don't do any of these things. I just enjoy knowing things that interest me. And
Right.
so,
And sorry, go ahead.
oh no, no, no. I was just, that is kind of what I would urge people to do. It is too easy now to pull out your phone, go to Google, and just be like, hey, why is a stop sign red? And Google will spit back to you. It's because red is one of the primary colors that most people's eyes are attracted to. Because the sky is blue, we tend to tune out blue hues. Red is on the opposite end of the spectrum, therefore your eye is more attracted to it. Boom. Just that simple.
And you call Google as a university, right?
Yeah, Google University. Yep.
Yeah.
Between Google and YouTube, there are very few things left in the world that if you wanted to know about, you can't find.
Yeah, but so many of us are like so. I wouldn't say lazy, but we're so. Because I feel like people aren't. Because I tended to notice in people like when they label something, like let's say they can't learn it, or they won't learn it. It shut out your brain to be able to observe. I mean, I can't say, to be able to pull in information. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
see. But here's the thing that tripped me up is because it's not about the fact. It's about it doesn't matter about the books. It's whether you learn or not, right? It's
Right.
about because there's many ways you can learn it through a blogs,
Mm-hmm.
Google, YouTube. Because there's even videos on Harvard on YouTube. They're putting free video online. You don't have to go to Harvard or Yale or Stanford, right? That's what
Right.
I've been trying to point that out to people. People. It's because you have to make it interesting for yourself to. Because I remember that you said because it's interesting to you, right?
Right.
When you want to learn it, you learn it, right?
Right.
So, right. And you can find any topic you want to learn. That's why I tell people it's not about the book, it's about the ideas or the content inside that will, innovate or change something or, create a world that you never knew that is possible. Is that
Exactly.
true? I know you know. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
And I mean, I feel like it's really sad that we don't still try to instill that in kids because we have a lot of smart kids out there whose intelligence is just languishing because they, you know, I I actually have a family member that right up until they turned 16 did not know where the library in the school was. Yeah, that place that you usually take a field trip to the first day of class, they did not know where the library was. And that was just kind of sad to me because there's so much knowledge there. Even if you're not, if you're not a bookworm and you just had to go there for that one project that one day, okay, fine. But, again, the fact that it's there and it's free to use and it's open to everyone and no one knows about it, or, kids now don't even know about it, it's just sad to me. And it's because we as adults haven't been instilling that same sense of curiosity or that same sense of wonder into kids about learning subjects that aren't necessarily covered in school.
Right. And I get what you're saying. It's really sad. It hurt. It actually hurt my heart, man. Like I was like it's not because I enjoy the moment, because 2013 changed my life. My whole, like, from 2011 to 2013. I didn't actually tell you about this. I went through a period of something, because I was heartbroken.
Right.
My ex broke up with me, so I couldn't see any way to live life. And
Right.
I hated everything. I cursed at everything. I cursed at God. You know, but something in between of 2013 changed my life, and I was, because I saw with an open eye that we are in essence sleepwalking, but we don't know that. It's
Right.
unconscious, but we weren't taught. It's just they call it spirituality, spiritual awakening. I don't know if you heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have where you're aware of this, you become aware, you become self-aware about your own environment, yourself. And then I start finding what happening to me. I start seeking the truth, or what is true, or what is false. You'll find some crazy things online. That's it.
Very,
But
very true.
yeah, but for me, knowledge is not to be consumed, but it's be able to, because I believe that effective education is to be able to change behavior. Because I looked at it, I was like, yeah, it's to change behavior, to change some aspect of your life that you're trying to become successful or that you don't like. Is that true, or I'm thinking?
Um, yes and no. I think it depends on the changes as far as whether or not it is effective. Um, I don't think anybody necessarily sends their kid off to school expecting them to come back a different person that day. We kind of want to build upon the foundation that's already there. But you are absolutely right. School should change you in some manner. Um, you know, School, the whole concept of school is to, well, current day anyway, um, is to help us build those social and cultural bridges that we will need to navigate the rest of life. It actually has very little to do with what goes on inside of a classroom because, let's just face it, we can spend your high school years teaching you a trade, sending you out the door, and you'll be more than likely just as successful. Um, I don't necessarily think anyone's life hinges on what plays Shakespeare wrote back in, 1453. So, you know, the whole concept of school is those social and cultural moments that teach us how we should treat other people. And so, in that sense, yes, it is very hard to have the same person that you had when you sent them off for the first grade that walks across the stage in the 12th grade. It's just not going to happen because they are going to be living life in between those moments. And it is up to parents and teachers to guide them through those hurdles along the way.
Right.
Um,
And I do. Sorry, guys.
no, that was, that was just kind of my cap on it of, yeah, they will change, but depending on the changes is going to dictate whether or not it is actually effective.
Yeah, because when it comes to school, I get kind of, when people ask. You see, I believe that you shouldn't ask a person where you should go to school. Or do you have a degree? For me, my take on it is this: that school, if it was really truly to become successful, I believe that people believe that school is the only way to become successful. But how it is, right? You can see
Right.
it. Bill Gates. I know you
Mm-hmm.
know. Like, you see
Yep.
Bill Gates in every entrepreneur. They innovate, like Steve Jobs, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not because sometimes we put this in a box. Everything we see we put in a box, right?
Right.
And sometimes when adults, usually I don't say anything because I'm as Asian I have to respect my elders, and I'm usually nice. But sometimes when they say stuff, because usually I take things in, like you said, I'm introverted,
Right.
and I take things in, and it make me angry and pissed off. And I was like, because they don't understand that my mind has changed. I didn't tell them that because I didn't communicate with them, and I don't want them to know.
Right.
It's not because if I would, if because see the thing is, if I we always communicate with each, we always talk, and that my mind is literally. Or how do you see me? That's how I'm interested. How do you see me? That's what I want.
It varies from day to day, but it's kind of like taking an avatar and changing their clothes. We have a baseline being the actual avatar itself, and depending on the day, they wear different clothes. If you were to see me in my street clothes as opposed to what I wear at work, you would probably think very differently of me. So, typically when I see you, and a lot of the times you don't know this, but I actually see you walking across the street in the morning. Um, but I'm like, hey, Johnny's getting it together. I can see the forward or the upward path that you were taking as opposed to the very first time that we sat down and talked, where you are an intelligent person. You had your head on straight. You just kind of needed that. You needed the directions to be able to get to shore. And I feel like you are staring at the lighthouse right now. That is my baseline of you. But again, each day brings a different opportunity to converse and a different side of you that maybe I haven't seen before, or maybe has been expanded upon since the last time. So if you were to ask any person what they think of you on any given day, and they are able to give you the same answer twice in a row, odds are it is prefabricated, it is not true, and they are just telling you what they think you want to hear.
Yeah, because I can take I can take constructive criticism. I may not like it, but because it's true. Like for instance, like this webcam, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the quality of the camera was really horrible because it was a laptop. And for a fact that there was a lady, I asked her really politely to to watch the video for to get feedback how it is,
Right.
and she said yeah, the interview, the me that you see is really clear right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And back then it was like really not clear. You couldn't see me.
Right.
And he said, yeah, how come I see the author, I can see him clearly, but not you? I was like, whoa. I thought it was perfect, right? Because in my head, I was like, I played the whole thing, and I was like, I kind of feel hurt. But then I realized, in order to change, I need to change. Like in order to improve, I must listen to the audience or whomever. So many people don't listen, right? So I
Right.
changed. That's why I see it's like clear because I can change.
Right.
I'm not adaptable, but I know that I'm adaptable to the degree. It's just that I have to take it in a little bit, and I was like, okay, I need to make the change, right?
Right. And I mean,
Uh,
we're all adaptable to an extent. Um, if we move to a new city, we adapt to it. When the seasons change, we adapt to it. So, we're all adaptable to an extent. It's just a matter of how adaptable someone wants to be. Humans are one of the few animals that have survived for as long as we have. And part of that is the ability to adapt. The only animals currently roaming the earth that outpace us are probably the alligator and the great white.
I'm sorry, I was thinking about aliens, but yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, but yeah, I know you were talking about alligators, and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, alligators and great whites. So I mean, we're a pretty adaptable species, um, on the whole. But there are those of us who just refuse. They don't feel like they need to, they don't want to, whatever the case may be. And again, if we were back to the point of natural selection, they would probably have died off. Um, so, again, everyone is adaptable to an extent. It's just a matter of how adaptable it is that you want to be.
Because they choose. They can choose. That's the thing that what I'm trying to get. Like you have like it's not a power, but you have like I don't believe in, all the crazy stuff that people believe in, predestined anymore. I used to think that as a kid because, we talked, my friend and I talk about, is there predestined? You can control your life. It's how you think it, it's your thoughts,
Right.
you know.
You are the author of your own story.
Right. Well, thank you for so much for doing this interview. You've been really amazing, and I'm very grateful that you're a friend and a mentor. I actually look up to you.
Hey man, I look up to you.
Why you look up to me?
Yeah, seriously. Because it is, it's whenever you get to see someone taking their own journey, it makes you think about your journey and the things that you could have and can still do differently. And so, I treat your successes as mine. I would hope that, the same would be true vice versa. But I hope to learn from you much like you learn from me. And again, that is that whole being able to be introspective and going, okay, I see the world around me. How does the world see me?
Oh,
So, thank you
yeah,
for that.
you're very welcome. No, thank you. That's It's just that the day that I met, like, for because you're a very interesting person. Like, I can't. For me, I like to have not like shallow conversation. I like to deep, like very deep, and I like to have fun sometimes. Well, if we're flexible, right? But
Right.
what do you mean by the lighthouse? Because I keep thinking about what do you mean by the lighthouse?
I mean that, while your journey is not done by any means, you can
True.
see the goal that you're shooting for. You can see it. And so that's what I mean by you're staring at the lighthouse. You're not quite too sure yet, but you know where you're going. It is very visible to you.
Yes, I do agree with that because I can see it. Because basically now I'm like I'm actually doing my dream. That's so awesome. Like I get to like interview like yourself, an expert. You may not know it, but you're an expert, right? And I interview authors, whomever, and then I'm a martial art master. That's still like I was like the only reason why I do that is not because I don't want to just do personal development. It's not very. I wanted to what I'm about is making my dream come true, meaning that it doesn't have to be like books or anything, because I want to, because there's different type of people and there's different expert and there's different opinion, right? You never know what you're gonna get, right?
Right.
So I was sitting there and I was listening to the Wing Chun Master, and I was like, yo, his like stuff is like. I was sitting there and I was like rewatching it because I had to edit it. I was like,
Right.
he gets some good information, man. He gets some good information that you never get.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
And like I said, it
Yeah,
could come from anywhere.
right. But we're not flexible about it, and we don't take this information in and adjust our behavior to it, right?
Right.
Right. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe to my channel, like the video, and I'll see you on the next time. Bye bye.
Have a good one.